I'm Caitlin, 32, sitting in my Porsche outside my parents' colonial house, hands trembling on the steering wheel. It's been 3 years since they skipped my wedding. 3 years of deafening silence. Until last week, when they spotted me driving this car at Francesca's restaurant. The shock on their faces was almost worth the pain. Almost. Now suddenly they're calling daily, acting like nothing happened. Funny how $135,000 worth of German engineering made them remember they have a daughter. I take a deep breath and reach for the door handle. Time to end this charade once and for all. If you've ever had family suddenly reappear in your life when things started going well, you're not alone. I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop a comment below about your own family drama experiences. And if you're new here, hit subscribe to join our community of survivors who've learned family isn't always about blood. Now, let me take you back to where this all began. Growing up in the prestigious Oakwood Estates neighborhood of Boston, I learned early that love in the Madison household came with conditions. My parents, Eleanor and Robert, weren't cruel or abusive. Sometimes I almost wish they had been. It would have been easier to explain. Instead, their particular brand of neglect was subtle, refined, like everything else in their world. "Caitlin, darling, an A-," Mother would say. Her voice honey-sweet but eyes cold as she examined my report card. Jessica Martin's mother told me Jessica got straight A's again. "I'm sure you'll do better next quarter." No congratulations for the other A's. No acknowledgement of my improvement in science. Just the quiet, crushing disappointment. Father was the same, though he expressed it differently. Second place in the piano competition? Well, keep practicing. Then he'd return to his Financial Times, discussion over. I learned that achievements weren't celebrated, they were expected. Anything less was simply not discussed. The only consistent warmth came from my grandmother Evelyn, my father's mother who lived with us until I was 24. She'd sneak into my room after particularly disappointing dinners, where my accomplishments had been diminished. "They don't know how to love properly, sweetheart," she'd whisper, her arthritic hands smoothing my hair. "Some people only know how to value things they can show off to others." Those moments sustained me, especially when compared to how they treated my brother Thomas. 3 years older and seemingly perfect, Thomas followed the prescribed path. Exeter Academy, then Harvard Business School, then investment banking. With each step, my parents' approval shone on him like a spotlight, while I remained in perpetual shadow. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" became the refrain of my adolescence. My interest in art and design was tolerated as a phase or a hobby, but never acknowledged as a legitimate path. When I was accepted to Rhode Island School of Design instead of an Ivy League, my mother actually cried. Not tears of joy, but of genuine distress. "What will we tell the Whitmores?" she lamented to my father, as though my education choice was a social embarrassment rather than an achievement. I remember looking at my acceptance letter alone in my room, the excitement I'd felt when opening it slowly leaking away. Grandmother Evelyn found me there, letter crumpled in my hand. "Congratulations, my brilliant girl," she said, and took me out for ice cream, the only celebration I would receive. By the time I graduated with honors, I'd developed a protective, emotional shell. I learned to stop seeking their approval, at least consciously. I took my design portfolio and moved to a tiny apartment in Cambridge, determined to build a career on my own terms. When Grandmother Evelyn passed away shortly after, I lost my emotional anchor. At her funeral, I stood between my parents, feeling the gulf between us widen even as our shoulders touched. She left me her modest savings and her collection of art books. For my Caitlin, who sees beauty where others see only function. I used that money to start my own small graphic design business, working nights and weekends while holding a day job at an advertising agency. My parents rarely asked about my work, except to question when I'd get a real job with benefits. Meanwhile, Thomas was thriving in their eyes. Making partner at his firm, buying a brownstone in Beacon Hill, dating the daughter of one of father's golf buddies. The perfect son continuing the perfect legacy. When I turned 27, I made the conscious decision to stop trying to earn their love. I couldn't change who they were, but I could change how much power they had over my happiness. I began declining invitations to family events where I knew I'd leave feeling diminished, I started therapy, learning to recognize the patterns of conditional love that had shaped my self-worth. I was building a life on my terms, slowly healing. Then I met David at a small coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. And everything changed. The Copper Kettle wasn't my usual coffee spot, but a sudden downpour had driven me through its doors. Soaking wet, laptop clutched protectively to my chest, I'd just lost a major client and was feeling like the universe was conspiring against me. "Here," a voice said, offering a stack of napkins. "Before your laptop drowns too." That was my first encounter with David Chen. Kind eyes, rumpled button-down, and a smile that reached all the way to those eyes. He was working on coding something complicated-looking. An empty chair across from him in the crowded cafe. "Mind if I sit?" I asked, already mentally calculating how much work I needed to do to make up for the lost client. "Only if you let me buy you whatever you're drinking," he replied. "You look like you're having one of those days." 3 hours later, we were still talking. David was a software engineer who'd started his own company 2 years prior. Unlike the privileged startup founders I'd met through my parents' circles, the ones with trust funds and family connections, David had built everything from scratch. "My parents own a restaurant in Quincy," he told me. "They wanted me to become a doctor, but when they saw I was serious about tech, they supported me anyway. Even tried to learn coding terms so they could ask about my work." I remember feeling a pang of envy at that. The idea of parents who supported your dreams, even if they didn't understand them, was foreign to me. Our first date was at his parents' restaurant, Golden Dragon, a modest place with the best dumplings I'd ever tasted. His mother hugged me within seconds of meeting me. His father kept bringing extra dishes to our table despite David's protests. "Try this one. Made special," Mr. Chen insisted, placing another steaming plate before us. The warmth in that small restaurant was overwhelming. They asked about my design work with genuine interest. Mr. Chen even wondering if I might help them update their menu and website sometime. "Your work is art," Mrs. Chen said after I showed her my portfolio on my phone. "Our David has good eye, finding you." In their modest restaurant, with its faded dragon decorations and laminated menus, I felt more valued than I ever had at my parents' country club. As David and I grew closer, my business began to turn around. I landed 2 new clients, then a contract with a rising tech company. David's unwavering belief in my abilities gave me confidence I'd never had before. "You're brilliant at what you do," he'd say, without condition or comparison. Simple statements of fact, not bargaining chips for affection. 6 months into our relationship, I finally introduced him to my parents. The dinner was as disastrous as I'd feared. "Software development," my father repeated when David explained his business. "Is that sustainable long-term? What's your exit strategy?" My mother was equally transparent in her disapproval, asking pointed questions about his family background and education. When David mentioned his parents' restaurant, she nearly choked on her wine. "How enterprising," she managed, exchanging glances with my father. In the car afterward, I apologized profusely, but David just took my hand. "Hey, now I understand so much more about you," he said softly, "and why you're so amazed when my mom sends food to my office just because it's Tuesday." Rather than driving us apart, my parents' coldness brought us closer. David understood my wounds in ways I couldn't articulate. When he proposed a year later on a weekend trip to Cape Cod, I didn't hesitate. "I want to build something real with you," he said, as waves crashed behind us. "Something based on who we actually are, not who anyone else thinks we should be." The modest diamond ring he offered wasn't designed to impress anyone. It was simply beautiful, like the promise it represented. When we called my parents to share the news, their response was lukewarm at best. "So soon?" Mother asked. Though we'd been together nearly 2 years. "We'll need to discuss dates carefully," Father added. "The club books up for weddings well in advance, and we'll need to coordinate with the right people." I took a deep breath, David's hand firm in mine. "Actually, we're planning something small. Just family and close friends." The silence on the other end spoke volumes. As wedding plans progressed, so did our careers. David's company secured its first major client, a financial services firm looking to overhaul their customer portal. My design business was growing steadily, with a wait list forming for my services. We bought a small condo together, combining his practical sensibilities with my design aesthetics. On weekends, we'd have dinner with his parents, who insisted on sending us home with enough leftovers for days. His father helped us install new cabinets in our kitchen. His mother taught me family recipes. "You family now," she insisted. Must learn Chen's special dumpling technique. With each passing month, I felt more secure, more loved, more at home in my own skin. David and I created our own traditions, our own definitions of success, our own metrics for a life well lived, which made what happened next all the more painful. I just never imagined my own parents would choose status over seeing their daughter get married. I'd love to know if any of you have experienced similar family dynamics. That feeling that your achievements only matter when they fit someone else's definition of success. Share your thoughts in the comments while I continue with what happened next. The wedding invitations were simple but elegant. Letterpress on cream cardstock with a watercolor design I'd created myself. David and I had decided on a spring ceremony at a converted farmhouse outside Boston. Nothing extravagant, but meaningful to us. When I dropped off my parents' invitation personally, my mother immediately started examining the cardstock quality. "Hammered cotton paper? The Aldridge wedding used Italian imported stock last season," she commented, running her finger over the letterpress indentation. "We like this one," I replied, forcing a smile. "The venue only accommodates 100 guests, so we're keeping it intimate." Father peered at the details over his reading glasses. "Pierce Farmhouse? Where is that exactly?" "Not in the city, surely. It's about an hour west. It's beautiful, overlooks an apple orchard." Mother's lips tightened. "Well, I suppose that's charming." Though the Fairmont had openings next fall, we checked, just in case. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the automatic response to their disapproval that I'd been fighting for years. "David and I want something that feels like us," I said firmly. "Not a production." The wedding planning continued, with David's family enthusiastically helping at every turn. Mrs. Chen organized a tasting dinner to help us decide on the menu. Mr. Chen offered his restaurant's delivery van to transport decorations. Even David's cousins volunteered to handle the music playlist and photo booth. Meanwhile, my parents maintained a cool distance, occasionally sending links to more suitable venues or questioning our choices. Still, I never imagined they wouldn't come. 3 weeks before the wedding, on the same day David's company secured its first major round of funding, I received the call. "Caitlin, darling," my mother began, using the tone that always preceded disappointment. "Your father and I have been looking at our calendar, and I'm afraid we have a conflict on the 18th. I sat down, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. "What conflict?" "The Brookhaven Charity Gala. Your father's on the board this year, and attendance is simply mandatory. We assumed you'd chosen a more convenient date." "The date has been set for 8 months, Mother. I told you when we booked the venue." "Well, perhaps you did, but the gala is quite important. The governor may attend." I stared at the phone, disbelief morphing into rage. "More important than your daughter's wedding? Now, Caitlin, don't be dramatic. We can celebrate another time. Perhaps a reception at the club when you return from your honeymoon. We could invite the right people then." The call ended with me in tears and David finding me curled up on our bedroom floor. He held me while I sobbed, not offering hollow reassurances, just steady presence. "They're not coming," I finally managed. "A charity gala is more important." David's face hardened, the angriest I'd ever seen him. "Then it's their loss. Completely and utterly their loss." The next day, his parents appeared at our door, arms loaded with food. "We hear you sad," Mrs. Chen said simply, pushing past me into the kitchen. "When heart hurts, stomach should not be empty." They stayed all day, Mrs. Chen cooking, while Mr. Chen fixed a leaky faucet we'd been meaning to address. They didn't offer advice or platitudes about family, they simply showed up. The wedding proceeded without my parents. We left 2 empty chairs in the front row, which seemed to silently scream their absence to everyone present. David's father stepped in to walk me down the aisle, whispering, "Proud to have daughter like you." As we began our walk, Thomas, my brother, called the night before to apologize for also not attending. "They're paying for my new house down payment," he explained weakly. "I can't rock the boat right now." Despite the empty chairs, the day was beautiful. David's family surrounded us with such genuine joy that the ache dulled, if only temporarily. Our friends celebrated with us, dancing until midnight under string lights in the apple orchard. The photos from that day show a woman smiling through determined eyes, happy in her choice of partner, devastated by the hole where her family should have been. After the honeymoon, a week in a cabin in Vermont, I sent my parents a card with a wedding photo enclosed. No response came. I called on my birthday, 3 months after the wedding. The conversation was stilted, with no mention of the wedding at all, as if it had never happened. "The Hendersons asked about you at the club," Mother said instead. "Their son just made partner at Goldman." I waited for an apology, an acknowledgement, anything. None came. That night, I made a decision. I wrote a final letter expressing my hurt and disappointment, explaining that I would be stepping back from contact until they could acknowledge what their absence had meant to me. I mailed it the next day. No reply ever came. The holidays passed without contact. Christmas cards I sent returned unopened. Thomas called occasionally, always from work, so our parents wouldn't know. "They don't talk about you," he admitted during one call. "It's like they're waiting for you to come back and apologize for being upset." As months stretched into a year, then too, I built emotional calluses over the wound. David and I focused on our careers and our life together. His parents became my family, including me in every holiday and celebration. We bought a house in a neighborhood we loved. We built a circle of friends who valued authenticity over appearances. I stopped checking my phone for messages that never came. I stopped rehearsing conversations with parents who couldn't hear me. I focused on building a life defined by real love, not its conditional counterfeit. And then something unexpected happened. Our careers exploded, simultaneously and dramatically, in ways that would eventually bring my parents rushing back into our lives. But not for the reasons anyone would hope. The irony wasn't lost on me that our professional breakthroughs happened almost simultaneously, exactly when we'd stopped seeking external validation. David's startup, initially focused on customer service software, pivoted to cybersecurity solutions just as several major data breaches hit the headlines. Suddenly, companies that had been dragging their feet on security upgrades were desperate for exactly what David's team had developed. "We need to hire more developers," he told me one night, looking slightly dazed after a conference call. "Jackson Financial wants to implement our entire security suite across their organization." It's a lot of zeros, Kate. Meanwhile, my design business had caught the attention of Vertex, a rapidly growing tech company with a progressive approach to branding. What started as a small project redesigning their website evolved into a complete rebranding initiative. "We want you to lead our entire visual identity overhaul," their CMO told me over lunch. "Your aesthetic perfectly aligns with where we want to position ourselves." The contract they offered was larger than all my previous year's earnings combined. Our sudden financial shift was disorienting. After years of careful budgeting and modest living, we found ourselves with more money than we knew how to handle. We had practical conversations about investments, savings, and retirement funds, the kind of financial planning my parents would have approved of, ironically. But we also allowed ourselves some indulgences. We renovated our kitchen. We took a 2-week trip to Japan that we'd been dreaming about. We donated to causes we believed in. We set up college funds for David's nieces and nephews. Through it all, we tried to maintain perspective about money and what it meant and didn't mean. I never want to become people who value others based on their bank accounts. I told my therapist, Dr. Winters, during a session, "I've seen what that does to families." "It sounds like you're worried about becoming like your parents," she observed gently. "Terrified," I admitted. Sometimes I catch myself making judgments about things like someone's clothes or car, and I hear my mother's voice in my head. Dr. Winters helped me work through these fears, distinguishing between appreciation for quality and the status-seeking I'd grown up with. David and I established our own family values, consciously deciding what role money would play in our lives. Money is a tool, not an identity, became our mantra. We agreed to use it for security, experiences, helping others, and occasional luxuries, but never as a measure of worth. About 2.5 years after our wedding, David came home with an unexpected suggestion. "I think you should buy the Porsche," he said over dinner. I nearly choked on my wine. "What?" "The 911 Carrera you've been drooling over every time we pass the dealership. You should get it." "David, that's ridiculous. It costs as much as a house in some states." He shrugged. "We can afford it. Your business is thriving. You work insane hours creating beautiful things for other people. Why not have something beautiful for yourself?" I hesitated, years of conditioning making me instantly defensive about such an obvious status symbol. It seems so flashy. "It's not about showing off," David said, understanding my concerns immediately. "It's about joy. You light up talking about that car. The engineering, the design, the performance. It's a work of art that brings you happiness. That's different from buying it to impress people." After weeks of consideration and more than a little guilt, I test drove the Porsche 911 Carrera S, gentian blue, with a caramel leather interior. The moment I got behind the wheel, I felt a surge of pure, uncomplicated joy. Not because of what others would think, but because of how it made me feel. I signed the papers the next day. Driving that car became a form of therapy. Early morning runs along coastal roads, with the windows down, became my meditation. I appreciated the precision engineering, the thoughtful design details, the balance of form and function. For the first time, I owned something expensive simply because I loved it, not because of what it signified to others. David's parents were predictably practical about the purchase. "Very fancy car," Mr. Chen commented when he saw it. "But you work hard, you enjoy. Just remember to come to dinner in old Honda sometimes too." That reminder, to stay grounded, delivered with affection rather than judgment, meant everything. 3 years passed without a word from my parents. 3 years of holidays with the Chens, of professional growth, of building our version of success. 3 years of healing from the wedding rejection, though the scar remained. Then came the night that changed everything. Our 3rd wedding anniversary. David had made reservations at Francesca's, a new upscale Italian restaurant in Back Bay that had a month-long waiting list. We were celebrating both our marriage and the news that Vertex wanted to take my contract international, expanding my role to their European divisions. We were midway through our entrees when I noticed them. My parents, seated across the restaurant with another couple I recognized as the Whitmores, longtime social connections of theirs. My hand froze midway to my wineglass. David, noticing my sudden tension, followed my gaze. "We can leave," he whispered immediately. I shook my head, heart pounding. "No, this is our celebration. I won't run." Throughout dinner, I felt their eyes occasionally finding us, though they made no move to approach. As David paid the bill, I steeled myself for what I knew would be an awkward encounter in the valet area. Sure enough, as we waited for our cars outside, they emerged from the restaurant. "Caitlin?" my mother called, feigning surprise, as if she hadn't been watching us all evening. "What a coincidence!" I turned, David's hand firmly in mine. "Hello, Mother, Father. It's been a while." The awkward small talk that followed was excruciating. 3 years of silence reduced to comments about the restaurant's wine list and Boston's unusually warm fall. Then the valet pulled up with our car, the Porsche gleaming under the restaurant's entrance lights. My father's casual mask slipped, his eyes widening slightly as he took in the vehicle. "That's yours?" he asked, unable to hide his shock. "Yes," I replied simply, not offering explanations. Mother stepped closer, her smile tightening. "My goodness, how? Nice. Business must be doing well." "It is," David answered, opening my door for me. "Caitlin's design work is in high demand internationally now. Companies recognize exceptional talent when they see it." We said our goodbyes, as politely distant as the greeting had been. As we pulled away, I caught a last glimpse of my parents in the rearview mirror, still staring after us. "Are you okay?" David asked, reaching for my hand. "I think so," I said, surprised to find it was mostly true. They looked older than I remembered. The next morning, my phone rang, my mother's number appearing on the screen for the first time in 3 years. And so began their sudden, renewed interest in my life. An interest that, I would soon discover, had nothing to do with love and everything to do with what that Porsche represented to them. If you've ever had someone try to come back into your life for the wrong reasons, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. How did you handle it? While you're sharing, please hit that like button if you're enjoying this story, and subscribe for more real-life family drama experiences. Now, let's get into what happened when my parents suddenly wanted to be part of my life again. The day after the restaurant encounter, my phone rang during a client meeting. Seeing my mother's name flash across the screen nearly made me drop the device. I declined the call, focusing instead on the brand presentation I was delivering to an international sportswear company. By evening, she had called 3 more times and left 2 voicemails, each more cheerful than the last, as if we'd simply missed our regular weekly catch-up rather than not spoken in 3 years. "Caitlin, darling, it was so wonderful running into you last night. We simply must catch up properly. Call me back when you have a moment." No mention of the wedding. No acknowledgement of the silence. No apology. I played the messages for David as we prepared dinner. "That's something," he said carefully, chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. "What are you thinking?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to ignore them. Part of me wants answers. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. Just remember who they've shown themselves to be." The calls continued over the next few days. Then came texts, emails, even a handwritten note delivered to my office. Each communication grew increasingly pressing, yet still danced around any real acknowledgement of the past. "The Sullivans are hosting their annual garden party next weekend. They specifically asked if you'd be attending. We'd love for you to join us." The mention of us as if we were still a unified family struck me as particularly audacious. A week after the restaurant encounter, I was working from home when my phone rang again. This time, it was Thomas. "Hey, Kate," my brother said, his voice unusually serious. "Got a minute? If it's about Mother's barrage of messages, I'm still processing. It's related, but not what you think. Can we meet for coffee? Someplace private." We arranged to meet at a small cafe in Cambridge, far from our parents' usual haunts. Thomas arrived looking tired, the golden boy showing signs of tarnish around the edges. He'd lost weight, and the confident posture I remembered had given way to a slight stoop. "You look good," he said, eyeing me as we sat with our coffees. "Really good. Success agrees with you. Thomas, what's going on? Why the sudden family reunion campaign?" He sighed, turning his coffee cup in slow circles. "You need to know what you're walking into. They're not in good shape financially." "What are you talking about?" "Father's firm, the investments. The firm lost 3 major clients last year. The market turned against several of their long-term positions. The house on Nantucket has been quietly listed. They've been keeping up appearances. But," he trailed off, looking genuinely pained. "And now they've seen me in an expensive car," I finished, the pieces falling into place. "It's not just that," Thomas continued. "They've been following your career more than you know. Mother has a Google alert set for your name. They've seen the press about your work with Vertex, about David's company. They've been tracking your success while pretending you don't exist." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. So, now that I might be useful, they're interested in reconciliation. Thomas didn't deny it. Instead, he looked down at his hands. "I need to apologize to you, Kate. For the wedding, for not standing up to them, for playing along with their games all these years." His unexpected apology caught me off guard. The brother I remembered had always aligned perfectly with our parents' values. "What changed?" I asked. "I've been in therapy," he admitted, a flush rising to his cheeks. "Started about a year ago. My marriage was falling apart. Caroline couldn't stand the constant social obligations, the pressure from our parents. She said I was becoming just like them." He looked up, eyes sad. She was right. We talked for nearly 3 hours. Thomas revealed patterns I'd never recognized from my position as the family outsider. How our parents had leveraged family connections for financial gain throughout their lives. how their social circle was carefully cultivated based on potential benefit, how even their charitable work was strategically planned for maximum networking opportunity. "I always thought they just preferred you," I said quietly. Thomas laughed without humor. "They preferred what I represented. The moment I started questioning their values, I became a disappointment too." As we parted, Thomas handed me a folder. "You should see these. They've been proactive about associating themselves with your success." Inside were printouts from various social media accounts and smaller society publications. Photos of my parents at events, captioned with references to their daughter, the acclaimed designer behind Vertex's revolutionary rebrand. Mentions in community newsletters about how the Madison family celebrates another success as daughter Caitlin's work expands internationally. They had been creating an entire fictional relationship with me and my accomplishments. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, feeling slightly ill. "Because you deserve to know what you're dealing with before you let them back in," Thomas replied. "I've played along too long to take the moral high ground, but at least I can be honest with you now." Over the next week, the communications from my parents intensified. My mother sent an email with the subject line, "Potential business opportunity, describing a friend's company that could benefit enormously from your design expertise, darling." My father called, leaving a voicemail about family investment strategies and how we should discuss your portfolio options now that you've achieved such wonderful success. Not once did either of them mention the wedding, the 3 years of silence, or offer any form of apology. Then came the text that finally prompted me to respond. "We've told the Hendersons all about David's exciting company. Richard's Venture Capital Group is very interested in similar investments. We could arrange a dinner?" The casual presumption that they could leverage my husband's business for their social capital pushed me past my breaking point. I finally called my mother back. "Caitlin! Finally! We were beginning to think you were avoiding us," she trilled, as if we'd spoken last week. "I've been busy," I replied neutrally. "You've been trying to reach me quite persistently." "Well, of course. After seeing you at Francesca's, we realized how much time has passed. Family should stay connected, don't you think?" The perfect opening. I agree. Which is why your absence at my wedding was so painful. A brief silence then. Water under the bridge, surely. We had that unfortunate conflict. And then you seemed so upset. These things happen in families. No apology. No acknowledgement of the hurt. Just dismissal. "I think we should talk in person," I said finally. "All of us." "Wonderful. We could meet at the club for lunch on—" "No," I interrupted. "At your house. This Sunday at 2. Just the 4 of us." After a moment of surprised silence, she agreed. When I told David about the planned meeting, he was supportive but concerned. "Are you sure about this? You don't owe them closure." "I'm not doing it for them," I explained, staring out the window at the Porsche parked in our driveway. The unexpected catalyst for this confrontation. "I'm doing it for me. I need to say my piece, directly and clearly. Then, whatever happens next, will be a conscious choice, not a wound that never healed properly." That night, I called Dr. Winters for an emergency therapy session to prepare for the confrontation ahead. We role-played potential scenarios, identified my boundaries, and developed strategies for maintaining emotional equilibrium. "Remember," she said as our session ended, "their reaction belongs to them, not to you. Your worth isn't determined by their ability to recognize it." As Sunday approached, the strangest thing happened. Rather than anxiety, I felt an increasing sense of calm. For the first time, I would be entering my parents' home not as the perpetual disappointment seeking approval, but as a successful woman secure in her own worth. I selected my outfit carefully. Professional but not showy. Expensive but not flashy. I wore the simple pearl necklace David had given me on our first anniversary. And yes, we drove the Porsche, not out of spite, but because it was my car. I refused to hide my success or pretend to be someone I wasn't. The very behavior that had characterized our family dynamics for too long. As we pulled into the familiar circular driveway of my childhood home, David squeezed my hand. "Remember," he said softly, "we're going home together, no matter what happens in there." I took a deep breath and nodded, then reached for the door handle, just as I'd done in the opening scene of this long, complicated family drama. The moment had come to confront the people who had shaped my understanding of love, for better and for worse, and I was finally ready. The night before our scheduled confrontation, my phone rang near midnight. Thomas's name flashed on the screen. "They're planning something," he said without preamble. I overheard a call between Father and Richard Henderson. "They're positioning themselves as early supporters of David's company." "What does that mean exactly?" I asked, sitting up in bed as David stirred beside me. "They're implying they've been advising David from the beginning, that they connected him with key investors." Thomas's voice was tight with urgency. "They're trying to establish themselves as instrumental to your success before you even arrive tomorrow." Sleep eluded me after that call. I spent hours scrolling through my parents' social media accounts, finding subtle but consistent references positioning themselves adjacent to my achievements over the past year. A photo caption mentioning our daughter's design exhibition for an event I'd never told them about. Comments on business articles about David's company. "So proud of our son-in-law's vision." They were rewriting history, inserting themselves into a narrative they had chosen not to be part of. The next morning, I called my business partner, Layla, asking her to send me copies of any inquiries about my connection to the Madison family. What she emailed shocked me. 3 different requests from industry publications asking about my family business background and how the Madison design legacy had influenced my work. "I told them you built your business independently," Layla wrote. "Was that wrong?" I forwarded everything to my therapist, Dr. Winters, who responded promptly. "Remember, this information gives you power. Knowledge is clarity, not a burden. Use it to stay grounded in your truth." When another call came from Thomas just hours before our meeting, I wasn't surprised. "There's more," he said, his voice lower than usual. "I found financial records. They've been leveraging your connection in ways you don't know about. Tell me, Father's been mentioning your clients in his investment pitches, implying he has inside information about Vertex's growth through his close family connection. And Mother, she's been telling her social circle that they financially backed your business initially." The audacity was breathtaking. "They didn't give me a dime, I know. But the story they're telling is that you were too proud to publicly acknowledge their help." Thomas paused. "There's something else. They're in worse financial shape than I initially told you. The Nantucket house isn't just listed, it's in pre-foreclosure." This revelation stunned me. My parents had always been the picture of financial stability. The idea of them facing foreclosure was almost inconceivable. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that they're desperate for access to new money channels. Your connections represent opportunity to them, Kate. That's what this reconciliation is about." Armed with this knowledge, David and I arrived at my parents' house exactly at 2. The property looked the same as always, immaculately maintained, imposingly elegant. But knowing what I now knew, I wondered how much of it was facade. Mother opened the door herself, unusual, as they typically had household help on Sundays. "Caitlin, darling, and David. How wonderful to see you both." Her hug felt foreign after so many years without contact. Over her shoulder, I saw my father emerge from his study, looking older than I remembered, but wearing the same practiced smile. "There's my girl," he said, as if I was returning from college for a weekend rather than confronting years of rejection. "And David, we've been following your company's progress. Remarkable work." The living room was set with an elaborate tea service that felt more appropriate for a business meeting than a family reconciliation. A portfolio folder sat prominently on the coffee table, the Madison Investment Group logo embossed on its cover. "We thought we'd discuss some exciting opportunities," Father began, reaching for the folder before we'd even fully settled into our seats. "Richard Henderson's group is very interested in companies like yours, David." "Before we get to that," I interrupted, "I think we need to address the past 3 years." My mother's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Oh, Caitlin, families have disagreements. It's natural. The important thing is that we're together now." "It wasn't a disagreement," I said evenly. "You chose not to attend my wedding. Then you cut contact for 3 years. Now you're suddenly interested in reconnecting, right after seeing visible evidence of our financial success." An uncomfortable silence fell. My father cleared his throat. We've always wanted what's best for you, Caitlin. Perhaps we've had different ideas about what that means. Different ideas? David spoke for the first time, his voice controlled but firm. You rejected your daughter on one of the most important days of her life. You've had no interest in our lives until you saw a luxury car. Now suddenly you're presenting investment opportunities? My mother flinched slightly at David's directness. We had obligations that conflicted with the wedding date. We explained that. A charity gala, I said flatly. You chose a networking event over your daughter's wedding. It wasn't just any event, Father protested. The governor was there. Connections were made that what? I interrupted. That were more important than family? Because that's what you demonstrated. That status and connections matter more than relationship. Mother set down her teacup with a sharp clink. You've always been so sensitive, Caitlin. So quick to take offense. We're trying to move forward here. To include you in opportunities that could benefit all of us, including claiming you've supported my business? Or that you've been advising David's company. I watched their faces carefully. We know you've been representing yourselves as involved in our success. Father's expression hardened. We are your parents. Your success reflects on our family naturally. Family? David echoed incredulously. You haven't behaved like family. Family shows up. Family supports without conditions. Family doesn't appear only when there's financial benefit. Young man, Father began, his tone warning. No, I cut in. He's right. And we need honesty here. Thomas told me about the financial problems. About the Nantucket house. About the lost clients. The mention of these private financial matters visibly shocked them. Mother's hand flew to her pearl necklace. A nervous habit I remembered from childhood. Thomas had no right to discuss private family matters, she said stiffly. He had every right to warn me about what was really happening here, I countered. You're not interested in reconciliation. You're interested in access to our connections, our clients, our success. That's unfair, Father insisted, though his eyes wouldn't meet mine. Family supports each other in all ways, including professionally. But that's just it, I said quietly. We haven't been family for 3 years. By your choice. You can't reject the relationship and then claim the benefits of it when convenient. Mother's composure finally cracked. Do you have any idea what it's been like? Watching other mothers celebrate their children's weddings, show pictures of grandchildren, discuss family vacations. I've had nothing to contribute. The raw honesty of this outburst was so unexpected that I momentarily faltered. For the first time, I glimpsed the social consequences my mother had experienced from their decision. So this isn't about reconnecting, I said slowly. It's about having achievements to discuss at lunch with your friends. You're twisting my words, she replied, but without conviction. Father tried a different approach. Caitlin, perhaps we handled the wedding poorly. We can acknowledge that. But families move past difficulties. The Madisons have always united around success. Your grandfather built this family's position through strategic relationships. I'm not interested in strategic relationships, I said firmly. I'm interested in authentic ones. Don't be naive, he scoffed. Your successful clients, your husband's investors, those are all strategic relationships too. No, David interjected. They're based on value exchange and mutual respect, not obligation or manipulation. The conversation continued in this vein for nearly 2 hours. Beneath the veneer of reconciliation, the true agenda became increasingly clear. They wanted access to our professional networks, our industry connections, the social capital of being associated with successful children. Not once did either of them offer a genuine apology for the wedding or the years of silence. Most revealing was a moment near the end, when Mother said with unexpected candor, "We didn't think it would last. David's background, his family's restaurant business. We assumed you'd realize your mistake within a year." The naked prejudice in her statement hung in the air. And now? I asked quietly. Well, now we see that he's quite accomplished, she replied, as if this changed everything. So if we'd remained of modest means, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Don't be deliberately obtuse, Caitlin. Success changes circumstances. As we prepared to leave, Father made one final attempt. At least consider letting me introduce David to Henderson's group. It could be beneficial for everyone." David shook his head. "I secure investors based on our company's merit and potential, Mr. Madison. Not family connections." Standing in the foyer, the childhood home that had once loomed so large in my psychology now seemed smaller, diminished by the limitations of the people who owned it. "I'll be in touch," I said, not committing to anything specific. I need time to process this conversation. As we drove away, the weight of realization settled over me. The parents I had spent years trying to please had never truly seen me, only the potential advantages I might provide. The conditional love I'd experienced wasn't a failure on my part to earn their approval. It was a fundamental limitation in their capacity to love without calculation. "Are you okay?" David asked as we turned onto the main road. "Surprisingly, yes," I answered, finding it was true. For the first time, I see them clearly. Not as I wished they were, but as they actually are. That clarity, painful as it was, would prove to be the most valuable inheritance my parents ever gave me. I sat in my Porsche outside my parents' house, hands gripping the leather steering wheel as I gathered my courage. David had offered to come with me for this final confrontation, but I knew this was something I needed to do alone. 3 days had passed since our family meeting. 3 days of processing with Dr. Winters, of long conversations with David and Thomas, of sleepless nights weighing my options. The clarity I had found watching my parents' manipulative behavior unfold had hardened into resolve. I wasn't coming to argue or seek approval. I was coming to establish truth and boundaries. Mother answered the door with visible relief. "Caitlin, we were hoping you'd call. Come in, your father's in his study." The house felt different now, less intimidating, more like a theater set where a specific kind of performance took place. I noticed things I'd overlooked before. The strategic placement of prestigious university alumni magazines, the prominently displayed photos with minor celebrities, the subtle signifiers of wealth and connection. Father emerged from his study, his expression cautiously optimistic. "Caitlin, good to see you. I've been thinking about our conversation, and I believe there's a middle ground we—" "Before we start," I interrupted, "I want to be clear about why I'm here. I'm not interested in business connections or social positioning. I'm here to establish what our relationship will look like moving forward, if we have one at all." They exchanged glances, the silent communication of long-married couples who coordinate their responses. "Of course, darling," Mother said smoothly, gesturing toward the living room. "Let's sit and talk like adults." The living room had been rearranged since our last visit. The business portfolio, notably absent, replaced by photo albums strategically open to family pictures from my childhood. A transparent attempt to evoke nostalgia and familial bonds. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. I began once we were seated. About patterns in our family. About the difference between love and approval." "We've always loved you, Caitlin," Mother interjected quickly. "In your way, perhaps," I acknowledged. "But it's always been conditional. Based on what I could achieve, who I could become, how I could reflect on the family image." Father shifted uncomfortably. Every parent wants their child to succeed. Success isn't the issue. It's how you've defined it, exclusively through status, money, and connections. When I chose a path that didn't align with those values, you withdrew. Not just your approval, but your presence. "The wedding," Mother sighed. "You're still fixated on that unfortunate timing conflict." "It wasn't a timing conflict," I said firmly. "It was a choice that communicated your priorities clearly. But honestly, the wedding is just the most obvious example of a lifelong pattern." I pulled out my phone and opened a document I'd prepared. "When I was 12, you missed my art exhibition because the Whitmores invited you to their yacht. When I was 16, you skipped my design award ceremony for a fundraiser at the club. When I graduated from RISD with honors, you attended but spent the entire time networking with the parents of Ivy League graduates." Father's expression hardened. "This catalog of perceived slights serves no purpose, Caitlin. They aren't perceived. They happened. And recognizing patterns is the first step toward changing them." Mother leaned forward, her voice softening into the conciliatory tone she used when redirecting uncomfortable conversations. "Perhaps we haven't always prioritized as we should have. We're willing to do better moving forward. Now that we understand how successful your chosen path has become. There it was again. The qualification. The condition. That's exactly the problem, I said quietly. You're willing to invest in a relationship now because of external success. Not because I'm your daughter. Not because you genuinely want to know me as a person. That's unfair, Father protested. Of course Let me finish, I interrupted, surprising myself with my firmness. When you saw the Porsche, something changed. Suddenly, I was worth reconnecting with. Suddenly, my husband was worth knowing. That car is just a thing. It doesn't make me more or less valuable as a person or as your daughter. A tense silence fell. Father adjusted his cufflinks. Another familiar gesture from my childhood. One that signaled his impatience with emotional discussions. What exactly do you want from us, Caitlin? He asked finally. Acknowledgement. Honesty. A genuine apology for missing my wedding and cutting contact for 3 years. And a commitment to a relationship that isn't based on what David and I can do for you professionally or socially. Mother's eyes widened slightly. I don't think that's a fair characterization of. It's exactly what happened, I cut in. Thomas showed me the financial records. He told me about the foreclosure on the Nantucket house. He showed me the social media posts where you've been creating a fictional relationship with us. Father's face flushed with anger. Your brother had no right to share private family matters. He had every right to be honest with me. Something you haven't been. The confrontation escalated as they realized I wasn't going to be manipulated or placated. Their defensive posture gradually gave way to something more revealing as they felt their control slipping. Fine, Father said abruptly. Yes. We thought the wedding was a mistake. Your choice of husband, the modest venue, all of it seemed beneath what we'd raised you for. The blunt admission hung in the air between us. And now, I prompted, now we see that we misjudged, he admitted reluctantly. David has proven himself capable. Your business has exceeded expectations. Do you hear yourself? I asked, genuinely curious if they could recognize how conditional their assessment remained. You're still evaluating our worth based on financial and social metrics. What else is there? Father asked. And for a moment, I glimpsed the genuine limitation in his worldview. He truly couldn't conceive of value separate from achievement and status. There's kindness, integrity, emotional support, being present for important moments regardless of how they reflect on you personally. The things David's family has shown me consistently. Despite having far fewer resources than you. Mother flinched slightly at the comparison. The Chen family owns a restaurant, she said, as if this explained everything. The Chen family has never missed a significant event in our lives. Mrs. Chen calls weekly just to check in, not to discuss business opportunities. Mr. Chen helped renovate our kitchen himself, not to save money but because he wanted to contribute to our home with his own hands. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something like genuine shame cross my mother's face. We weren't raised to demonstrate affection that way, she said quietly. I know, I acknowledged, feeling a surprising surge of compassion. Grandmother Evelyn told me about your upbringing, Mother. About grandfather's rigid expectations. But at some point, we have to decide whether to perpetuate the patterns we inherited or create new ones. Father stood suddenly, walking to the window overlooking their immaculately landscaped yard. What do you want from us, Caitlin? Specifically, what are your terms? The businesslike framing was so characteristically him that I almost smiled. If we're going to have a relationship moving forward, I need several things, I said clearly. First, a genuine acknowledgement of the hurt caused by missing my wedding and the 3 years of silence. Not excuses or justifications. Real accountability. Mother nodded stiffly. Second, no more fictionalizing our relationship or involvement in my business or David's company. No more implying you've supported or advised us when you haven't. Father turned from the window, frowning. That will be complicated to walk back at this point. Nevertheless, it stops immediately, I insisted. Third, our relationship needs to exist independently of professional or financial considerations. No more attempts to leverage our connections or suggest business opportunities as a condition of family interaction. And if we agree to these terms? Mother asked. Then we can begin rebuilding. Slowly, with appropriate boundaries. Sunday dinners once a month, perhaps. Getting to know each other as the adults we actually are, not the roles we've been playing. They exchanged another of their silent communications. We'll need to consider this, Father said finally. Take the time you need, I replied, standing to leave. But understand that these aren't negotiable points. They're the minimum requirements for a healthy relationship moving forward. At the door, Mother surprised me by reaching for my hand. We do love you, Caitlin. In our way. I believe you do, I said gently. But love without respect and acceptance isn't the kind of love I can build a relationship on anymore. As I drove away, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because the situation was resolved, it was far from it, but because I had finally spoken my truth without seeking their approval of it. Whatever happened next would be a choice, not an obligation or a desperate attempt to win love that had always been conditionally offered. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me. The Porsche, a symbol of the material success they valued, had become the catalyst for confronting the emptiness of those very values. As I accelerated onto the highway, I found myself smiling at the unexpected ways life delivers its most important lessons. The week following my confrontation with my parents passed in a strange limbo. No calls, no texts, no emails. The silence reminded me of the post-wedding years, but this time it felt different, deliberate rather than dismissive. They were considering my terms, weighing the cost of authentic relationship against the comfort of their established patterns. Thomas called midweek, curious about the outcome. They haven't mentioned it, he reported. But Mother canceled the Bradleys' dinner party, which is unprecedented. They're definitely processing. David gave me space to sort through my complicated emotions while remaining steadfastly supportive. Whatever they decide, I'm proud of you for standing in your truth, he told me. As we walked along the harbor one evening, that took tremendous courage. Dr. Winters helped me prepare for either outcome during our session. The important thing to remember is that their decision reflects their limitations, not your worth, she emphasized. You've done the hard work of defining healthy boundaries. Now the ball is in their court. I threw myself into work, finalizing designs for Vertex's European expansion while trying not to check my phone every hour. The emotional clarity I'd found during our confrontation remained, but uncertainty about the future of our relationship still weighed on me. On Sunday afternoon, exactly 1 week after our confrontation, my mother's name appeared on my phone screen. We'd like to meet again, she said without preamble, to discuss your proposal. We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a private room at a downtown restaurant rather than their house or mine. The choice of venue itself felt symbolic, a recognition that we were negotiating new territory. David offered to accompany me, but again I declined. I need to handle this myself, I explained, but maybe stay close by? In case I need you after. He kissed my forehead. I'll be at the coffee shop across the street. Just text and I'll be there in 2 minutes. My parents were already seated when I arrived, both impeccably dressed as always. Father had his lawyer's portfolio on the table, a detail that immediately set my guard up. This still felt like a business meeting to them. Caitlin, Mother greeted me, her smile tight. You look well. I took my seat, determined to remain centered regardless of the outcome. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Father cleared his throat, straightening his tie. We've given serious consideration to your requirements for moving forward. He opened his portfolio, revealing typed notes. While we find some of your characterizations of our family dynamics unfair, we're willing to acknowledge that the wedding situation could have been handled differently. Not exactly the genuine acknowledgement I'd asked for, but I remained silent, waiting. Regarding your business and your husband's company, he continued, we can agree to refrain from implying direct involvement. However, as your parents, some natural association is inevitable in social circles. That's not what I asked for, I said evenly. I asked for an end to fictional narratives about your involvement or support. Being my parents doesn't give you claim to my professional achievements. Mother shifted uncomfortably. It's not quite that simple, Caitlin. In our social circles, family connections are assumed. To explicitly deny involvement would raise more questions than it answers. Then answer those questions truthfully, I replied. Say that we've built our careers independently. That shouldn't be shameful. Isn't self-sufficiency supposed to be a virtue? Father removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. You're being deliberately difficult. There are social realities to consider. I'm being honest, I corrected. Something that seems increasingly difficult for this family. A tense silence fell. Finally, Mother spoke. The third condition, about separating family relationships from professional opportunities. We find that problematic. Why? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Families support each other in all ways, including professionally, Father replied, echoing his statement from our previous conversation. To artificially separate those aspects of life is unnatural. I took a deep breath. It's not about never discussing work or making introductions that might be mutually beneficial. It's about those things not being the basis for our relationship. It's about you showing interest in my life whether or not it provides social or financial advantage to you. They exchanged glances, clearly struggling with this concept. We've prepared a counterproposal, Father said finally, sliding a document across the table. I scanned it quickly, my heart sinking. What they proposed was essentially a formalized version of exactly the kind of conditional relationship I'd been trying to escape. Family gatherings would revolve around strategic social events. They would respect my sensitivities about the wedding, not actually apologize, in exchange for occasional introductions to my professional network. It was a business arrangement, not a family reconciliation. I slid the document back without signing. This isn't what I asked for. It's what we can offer, Father said firmly. Then we have a problem, I replied, because I'm not willing to continue a relationship on these terms. Mother's composure finally cracked. What do you expect from us, Caitlin? To completely reinvent ourselves at our age? To pretend the social world we've spent decades navigating doesn't exist? I expect authenticity, I said quietly. I expect love that doesn't come with conditions. I expect to be valued as your daughter regardless of what I can do for you. That's not how the world works, Father insisted. Maybe not your world, I acknowledged. And that's the heart of the issue, isn't it? We live in different worlds now, with different values. Looking at their faces, defensive, frustrated, genuinely unable to understand my perspective, I felt a profound sadness, but also a sense of acceptance. I think we've reached an impasse, I said gently. You can't give what you don't have, and I can't accept less than what I need anymore. So, that's it? Mother asked, her voice uncharacteristically small. You're cutting us off again? I'm not cutting you off. I'm defining what I need for a healthy relationship. The door remains open if you ever feel able to meet those needs. I stood to leave, but paused, reaching into my bag. I wrote this for you. Please read it when you're ready. I placed an envelope on the table. A letter I'd written with Dr. Winter's guidance, detailing my experience as their daughter, my hopes for healing, and resources for understanding family dynamics and emotional healing if they ever became interested. Father stared at the envelope without touching it. Caitlin, you're making a mistake. Family is family. These fashionable ideas about boundaries and emotional authenticity, they don't supersede blood ties. Blood doesn't guarantee love, I said simply. Actions do. When your actions demonstrate real love, not conditional approval, I'll be here. I left them sitting there, the unsigned document between them, the unopened letter waiting for a readiness they might never find. David was waiting at the coffee shop as promised, concern evident in his eyes as I approached. How did it go? They couldn't do it, I said, surprised by my own calm. They literally couldn't understand what I was asking for. He held me close as I processed the finality of what had just happened. Not an explosive ending, but a quiet recognition of incompatible values. That evening, as we sat in our backyard watching the sunset, David asked, "Are you okay?" I considered the question carefully. Not entirely. I'm sad for what could have been. I'm sad that they're trapped in such a limited understanding of love, but I'm at peace with my decision. For the first time, I chose my well-being over their approval. Later that week, Thomas came over for dinner. He'd received a version of events from our parents that bore little resemblance to reality. They said you demanded they disown all their friends and never mention your business success to anyone, he reported with a wry smile. Apparently, you also insulted Mother's family and called Father a failure. Sounds about right, I laughed. The absurdity of their defensive rewriting somehow more amusing than hurtful. Thomas sobered. I'm making changes too. Caroline and I are in couples therapy. I'm stepping back from some of the family business obligations. Trying to figure out who I am outside of the Madison name. It's not easy, I acknowledged. No, he agreed. But watching you stand your ground, it inspired me. Made me realize we have choices. As days turned into weeks, I solidified my boundary through action. I filtered their occasional messages, responding politely but briefly to general inquiries, ignoring attempts to revert to old patterns. I removed myself from family email chains focused on social networking and status updates. Most importantly, I continued the internal work with Dr. Winters, untangling my self-worth from their approval, recognizing that their limitations weren't my failure. Healthy boundaries aren't about punishing others, she reminded me during one particularly difficult session. They're about creating space for authenticity and genuine connection. That space, initially painful in its emptiness, gradually filled with chosen family. Sunday, dinners with the Chens. Game nights with friends who knew and accepted the real me. Deepening my relationship with David. Free from the shadow of parental judgment. When a card arrived on my birthday signed by both parents with a gift certificate to an upscale spa, no personal message, no acknowledgement of our last conversation, I recognized it for what it was. The only language of care they knew how to speak. I sent a polite thank you note, neither rejecting their gesture nor mistaking it for the deeper connection I'd requested. Some parents can only love in the ways they were taught, David observed as I sealed the envelope. It doesn't mean they don't love at all. I know. I agreed. But understanding that doesn't mean I have to accept it as enough anymore. The most surprising outcome of setting boundaries with my parents was how it rippled through other relationships in my life. I became more authentic with clients, more willing to assert my creative vision rather than simply pleasing others. I developed deeper friendships based on mutual respect rather than surface-level social connection. Most importantly, I gained clarity about the kind of family David and I wanted to create, one built on unconditional acceptance, emotional presence, and love that didn't require performance to be sustained. A foundation strong enough for whatever the future might bring. A year after setting boundaries with my parents, I sat in my doctor's office, staring at the ultrasound screen in wonder. The tiny flickering heartbeat seemed impossibly fast, impossibly miraculous. Everything looks perfect, Dr. Rivera said, smiling at the expression on my face. 12 weeks along and developing beautifully. David squeezed my hand, his eyes suspiciously bright. We'd been trying for 6 months, and the reality of impending parenthood still felt surreal. That's our baby, he whispered, voice thick with emotion. Later that evening, curled on the couch with a cup of herbal tea, the weight of responsibility settled over me. I keep thinking about what kind of parents we'll be, I admitted to David. How we'll break the cycles. He nodded, understanding immediately. We have good models and bad models. We get to choose which ones to follow. The past year had brought significant changes. We'd maintained limited, structured contact with my parents, holiday cards, occasional brief phone calls, a distantly polite relationship that acknowledged the unbridgeable gap in our values without forcing false intimacy. They never did read the letter I'd left them at our final meeting. Mother had called a month later to say they found it unnecessarily dwelling on the past and preferred to move forward positively. Their version of moving forward meant pretending the confrontation had never happened, continuing their surface-level social performance of family without the emotional substance I'd requested. I'd accepted their limitations with a sadness that no longer consumed me. Their inability to meet my needs was about them, not me, a truth that had taken 32 years and considerable therapy to fully internalize. Meanwhile, my relationship with Thomas had deepened into something genuine. He and Carolyn had separated briefly, reconciling after he made significant changes in his priorities and values. They now lived in a modest home in Cambridge, rather than the Beacon Hill brownstone. both working for nonprofits and raising their son with a deliberate focus on emotional intelligence alongside achievement. It's like breathing different air, Thomas told me during one of our now regular sibling dinners. Living outside the Madison pressure cooker, my business continued to thrive, expanding into new markets with an approach that prioritized design integrity over profit margins. David's company had turned down a lucrative acquisition offer that would have compromised their data privacy values, choosing instead a sustainable growth model that preserved their core mission. Most significantly, 3 months after my boundary-setting confrontation with my parents, I'd sold the Porsche. The decision wasn't about rejection or spite. The car had served its purpose, not as a status symbol, but as a catalyst for confronting patterns I'd been unable to face otherwise. I'd enjoyed it thoroughly, appreciating its engineering and design as I'd intended. But as David and I discussed our future and the family we hoped to build, different priorities emerged. The money from the sale went into a trust we established for education and experiences, not just for our future children, but for David's nieces and nephews, for scholarships at underserved schools, for programs that nurtured creativity in young people regardless of their economic background. Not a bad trade, David observed as we finalized the paperwork. A car for a legacy. Now, with a baby on the way, the question of family legacies felt more pressing than ever. "Do we tell your parents about the pregnancy?" David asked as we prepared for bed that night. I considered carefully. Yes, but with clear expectations. They can be grandparents who send birthday cards and occasional gifts if they choose. But they don't get unfettered access unless they demonstrate consistent respect for our boundaries. And if they can't do that, then our child will still be surrounded by people who can. Your parents, our friends, Thomas and Caroline. Family isn't just DNA. As we painted the nursery the following weekend, surrounded by drop cloths and color samples, Mrs. Chen arrived with homemade dumplings and practical advice about morning sickness remedies. "Baby needs happy mother," she insisted, pressing ginger tea into my hands. "You rest." David and Mr. Chen finished painting. Mr. Chen, who had arrived with tool belt already strapped on, nodded seriously. "Color very nice. Good for baby brain development." The casual, practical affection they showed, bringing food, offering help, expressing joy in our happiness without condition, remained my model for what family should be. 2 weeks after the ultrasound, a formal card arrived from my parents, congratulating us on the pregnancy news Thomas had shared with them. No phone call, no personal note, just an expensive baby blanket from an upscale boutique and a check made out to baby Madison Chen. The formality didn't surprise me. What did surprise me was my response. Not hurt or disappointment, but simple acceptance. This was who they were, loving in the limited way they understood, through material provision rather than emotional presence. I deposited the check into the baby's education fund and sent a polite thank you note with a copy of the ultrasound photo. "Some relationships can only be transformed so much," Dr. Winters observed during our now monthly check-in session. "The success is in accepting that reality without being diminished by it." As my pregnancy progressed, David and I had serious discussions about values, parenting approaches, and the kind of environment we wanted to create. "I want our child to know they're enough, exactly as they are," I said one evening as we assembled a crib, "that they don't have to achieve to be loved. And also that achievement doesn't have to come at the cost of joy or authenticity," David added, tightening a bolt with determined precision. We created a list of family values, framing it for the nursery wall. Love is unconditional. Mistakes are for learning. Questions are always welcome. Your worth is inherent, not earned. Our home is a safe place to be yourself. We value who you are, not just what you do. As I entered my 3rd trimester, an unexpected email arrived from my mother containing a single question. "Would you be open to having lunch, just the 2 of us?" After consultation with David and Dr. Winters, I agreed, with clear parameters about topics and duration. We met at a quiet cafe near my office, my mother arriving precisely on time as always. She looked older somehow, less certain than I remembered. "You look well," she said, eyeing my prominent baby bump. "Pregnancy agrees with you." It has its challenges, I replied honestly. But we're excited. After ordering, she surprised me by producing a small, worn photo album from her purse. I found this recently, going through some old things, she explained, pushing it toward me. I thought you might want it. Inside were photos I'd never seen. My mother during her own pregnancy with me. Her face young and softer somehow, looking down at her swollen belly with an expression of genuine wonder. Your grandmother took these, she said quietly. My mother. She died when you were 2, so you wouldn't remember her. I'd heard little about my maternal grandmother, a subject my mother rarely discussed. She was different from your father's mother, less conventional. She used to sing to you before you were born. I thought it was silly at the time. Something in her voice made me look up sharply. For a brief moment, I glimpsed vulnerability beneath her carefully maintained facade. What was she like? I asked. Mother hesitated. Creative. Emotional. Always telling me I was too concerned with appearances. We argued constantly when I was growing up. She traced a finger over one of the photos. She would have understood you better than I did. The lunch continued with careful conversation, neither of us venturing into the territory of our fundamental disagreement. Yet something had shifted. A tiny window had opened into my mother's own complex history with family expectations and maternal relationships. As we parted, she hesitated. I'm not. I don't know how to be different than I am, Caitlin, but I would like to know my grandchild. I'd like that too, I replied honestly. On terms that are healthy for everyone involved. She nodded once, her composure returning. I'll consider what that might look like. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation or a fundamental transformation, but it was, perhaps, a small step towards something more authentic than we'd managed before. By the time our daughter Evelyn Chen Madison arrived on a snowy February morning, named for the grandmother who had shown me unconditional love, we had established clear parameters for family involvement. My parents would be invited to major milestones and receive regular photo updates. Direct visits would be supervised and limited initially, with the potential for greater involvement if they consistently respected our parenting approach. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, by contrast, became fixtures in our home, bringing home-cooked meals, offering to watch the baby so we could rest, teaching me lullabies in Mandarin that soothed Evelyn instantly. She has your eyes, Mrs. Chen declared proudly. Smart eyes. See everything. Thomas and Caroline's son became a regular playdate companion even in these early months, the cousins lying on blankets side by side, while we adults marveled at how differently we were raising our children compared to our own upbringing. No pressure about Ivy League preschools, Thomas joked, though we both knew the shift in values was deadly serious. My parents attended Evelyn's first birthday party, a simple gathering in our backyard with homemade cake and no formal photographer. They seemed uncomfortable with the casual nature of the celebration, but made a visible effort to engage appropriately, bringing an age-appropriate gift rather than the extravagant items they'd initially suggested. Father even got down on the floor to show Evelyn how to stack blocks, looking somewhat bewildered when she immediately knocked them down with gleeful abandon. She's learning about cause and effect, I explained, rather than chiding her for destroying his careful construction. He raised an eyebrow but said nothing, continuing the game as she demanded, again, with infectious enthusiasm. It wasn't perfect. They still occasionally made comments about proper schools and developmental advantages. They still viewed life largely through the lens of achievement and status, but they were trying, in their limited way, to connect with a grandchild on her terms rather than theirs. As for David and me, parenthood deepened our commitment to breaking generational patterns. We made conscious choices daily, celebrating effort over outcome, validating emotions rather than suppressing them, creating space for mistakes and growth rather than demanding perfection. On quiet evenings after Evelyn was asleep, we would sometimes reflect on the journey that had brought us to this point. Remember when we thought a Porsche was a big deal? David laughed one night, as we sorted through baby clothes she'd already outgrown. It was never about the car, I said thoughtfully. It was about what it represented. Success on my own terms. Independence from their approval. I needed that symbol then to find my way here. And where exactly is here? He asked, wrapping his arms around me. I looked around our modest but comfortable home, at the walls decorated with local artists' work and family photos, at the toys scattered across the floor despite our best efforts at organization, at the calendar marked with playdates and Chen family dinners and Thomas's regular visits. True wealth, I answered simply. The kind you can't drive or display at charity galas. A few days later, going through old papers, I found the family values list we'd created for the nursery before Evelyn was born. Reading it with a year of parenthood behind me, I felt the weight of responsibility and the light of possibility in equal measure. Breaking generational patterns wasn't a single decision, but a daily commitment, a conscious choice to value connection over achievement, authenticity over appearance. My relationship with my parents continued to evolve within the boundaries I'd established, sometimes warming slightly, sometimes cooling when old patterns emerged, but always fundamentally changed from the dynamics of my childhood. I no longer sought their approval or measured my worth by their validation. Instead, I engaged with them as one adult to another, accepting their limitations while protecting my own well-being and my daughter's. The most powerful lesson came unexpectedly, as Evelyn began forming her own personality, stubborn, creative, deeply feeling. I found myself occasionally slipping into familiar patterns, pressuring her to perform for visitors or minimizing her big emotions when they were inconvenient. Each time, I caught myself, remembering how it felt to be valued only for achievement, to have feelings dismissed as oversensitivity. It's okay to be upset, I would tell her instead, kneeling to her level. Big feelings are hard sometimes. I'm here with you while you feel them. In those moments, I was healing my own inner child even as I parented my daughter differently, breaking the cycle not just for her, but for myself. The final piece of closure came when we sold our house to move to a neighborhood with better schools and a yard where Evelyn could play. As we packed, I found the folder containing my parents' counterproposal from that pivotal confrontation, their attempt to formalize a conditional relationship based on mutual advantage rather than authentic connection. I held the document briefly, remembering the pain of that moment but also the liberation that followed. Then I placed it in the recycling bin, no longer needing to keep evidence of a battle that had ultimately freed me. Our new home had a dedicated playroom, a garden where we planted vegetables with Evelyn's enthusiastic but chaotic help, and a front porch where the Chens would sit in the evenings, telling stories of their early days in America while David and I listened, absorbing the family history our daughter would inherit. My parents visited occasionally, still somewhat uncomfortable with the casual atmosphere, but gradually finding their own way to connect with Evelyn, father teaching her chess with surprising patience, mother showing her how to press flowers between book pages, a craft her own mother had taught her long ago. It wasn't the family dynamic I'd dreamed of as a child, desperate for unconditional approval. It was something more complex, but ultimately healthier. A relationship based on reality rather than fantasy, on accepted limitations and conscious choices. As I tucked Evelyn into bed one night, she asked, as children do, "Do you love me?" "Always," I answered without hesitation. "No matter what. Even when I'm messy?" she persisted, her eyes serious. "Especially then," I assured her. "Love isn't something you earn by being perfect. It's already yours, always." The conviction in my voice came from the hard-won knowledge that I was breaking a cycle, healing a wound that had persisted through generations. In that simple exchange lay the most valuable inheritance I could give her, not status or connections or material advantage, but the unshakable certainty of her inherent worth. That night, watching her sleep, I reflected on how my journey had come full circle. What began with a car, a symbol of the success my parents might finally value, had culminated in something far more precious: the freedom to love and be loved without condition, measurement, or performance. The true wealth I'd found had nothing to do with bank accounts or social status. It lived in the messy, imperfect, authentic connections we'd built, in the courage to set boundaries and the wisdom to allow for growth within them, in the daily choice to parent from wholeness rather than wound. In the end, the most valuable thing my parents gave me wasn't their approval, but the opportunity to discover I could thrive without it. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who couldn't love you the way you needed? Or found yourself breaking generational patterns as you built your own family? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Your experiences might help someone else find the courage to stand in their truth. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and consider subscribing for more family journey narratives. Sharing is also appreciated. You never know who might need to hear that they're not alone in navigating complicated family relationships. Thank you for accompanying me through this chapter of my life. Remember, true wealth isn't in what you own or how others see you. It's in the authenticity of your connections and the courage to live by your own values. Until next time, wishing you all the courage to create the family dynamics you deserve, whether with the family you were born into or the one you choose to build.